The short answer is yes. The long answer is also yes. So why aren't we doing anything about it? So Trump just slapped sanctions on China to stop them from stealing intellectual property, and then China retaliated by slapping sanctions of their own on the USA. I hope the price of these phones don't go up, because the whole reason to buy Chinese phones is because they are cheap. So as some of you know, my main focus is on Chinese products like tablets, laptops, and phones. So many of the examples I derive are going to be from this section of the Chinese economy. So let's start with some context. Has China stolen some IP? And the short answer is yes, and I'll give you two examples. Number one, Huawei has stolen from a couple of companies, and I'll name three of them: Cisco, Motorola, and Nortel. So let's start with Cisco. Huawei actually stole the designs to Cisco's router, including the software, the chassis, down to the wire of that router. And Cisco actually sued Huawei, and they settled out of court. Now, the situation with Huawei and Motorola is a little bit different. Huawei actually hired ex-Motorola engineers to work for Huawei with the intention of getting your trade secrets from Motorola. And again, Motorola sued Huawei, and they settled out of court. Now, do you guys remember Nortel? That's a telecommunications company that is now bankrupt. Now, did you know that for a period of about 10 years, Nortel's database was hacked by hackers, and they had almost full access to everything, including emails, conversations, schematics, everything? And a security manager actually found 7 Nortel accounts that had been hacked, including the CEOs. And they found out that files, schematics, diagrams, everything had been sent over to mainland China. Now, the second example is China stealing Google's source code. So what actually happened was they targeted hacks on people's laptops who were source code managers, and they took that source code and they actually used it to hack into other companies like banks, conglomerates, and other places like that. So the thing is, it's super easy for China to steal intellectual property. And why is that? And the root cause of all this is because of protectionist business practices, right? China is very protective of their own Chinese companies, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say Intel ships a couple of CPUs to China and they want to sell it. China won't actually let them sell it until they quote unquote look at the source code to make sure it's cool. And the other thing is that if Intel wants to do business in China, they can't actually do business unless they have a local business partner in order to help them with that. And in that case, China can actually use that kind of relationship to steal a lot of stuff, intellectual property, from these companies. Let me give you guys an example. Microphones. Back in the day, good microphones were made in places like Germany, in Australia, and in Japan as well. But these companies started moving their manufacturing over to China. And of course, when you make your microphones in a Chinese factory, the Chinese have access to your schematics. They have access to what products you use and what kind of components you put inside the microphone. And as a result, the Chinese factories just pretty much copied this wholesale, made the microphone, and sold it for cheaper. And that is how we actually now have some pretty decent microphones for a pretty low price, like what I have right here, MXL V67. Now, onto the question, why haven't people done anything about it? Now, there are a couple of reasons for that. But one reason is that patent law is actually pretty new. Did you know that the US Patent Office was only established in 1975, and international patent law was not down pat and didn't really have any teeth with regards to forcing people to follow it until very recently. So yeah, so China's been stealing for a long time, and you want to stop them now, that's going to be pretty difficult. So as you guys know, it's a lot easier for Chinese hackers to poke holes in these firewalls than it is to create a firewall with no hole. And even if you are a security manager and you create this perfect elaborate firewall with no holes, you still cannot secure your company's data because the weakest link are people. And the easiest way to gain access into a company is through phishing, right? Just fish around for that guy's information, you get it, you're in. The best firewall cannot stop you. So here's an example. Let's say you work for Microsoft and you get an email from Microsoft saying, yo, give me your password. And the email address says support@microsoft.com. And let's say you don't recognize that it's Mirko instead of micro. And they say, okay, fine, here's my password. Bam, you're done. Doesn't matter what kind of firewall you have. As long as that guy has your password, they can have access to anything they want. So I'm actually sure many of you guys have had this, where you get an email from PayPal with a double L or with an I or something like that, and they're like, oh yeah, that's obviously not PayPal. But some people actually don't notice, right? Not everybody who works in a company is completely tech savvy, and they might not actually see that happening. and they might not catch it, and they might fall for that trick. So are there ways to stop it? Of course. You just stop doing business with China. Actually, you know what? That might not actually completely stop the flow of patent infringement or IP stealing away, but it might slow it down significantly. But obviously that's not feasible because pretty much everything comes from China now, and US and China have such a strong intertwined trade relation that you can't just stop the flow of goods. Both companies are gonna suffer huge. So the other way is Trump's way, sanctions, right? You slap a sanction on China and hope they'll stop. But the problem is China is too big and too powerful, and too much of the world depends on China to produce their goods, that if you slap a sanction on China, China's just gonna slap a sanction right back at you because of how much you need China. However, if I stopped here, I know many of you guys would be fairly dissatisfied because you want a solution to stop it, and I do have one, and let me present. So we all think of patent law as something that is fair, is reasonable, and is non-discriminatory, right? It's just, it's good, and it's moral. And that non-discriminatory part means that it doesn't matter who you're selling it to, the patent cost is the same. Now, let's say you invented a new kind of steering wheel and you want to charge people $8 to use that kind of steering wheel. So it doesn't matter where you sell that car, it's $8 flat rate. But the thing is, prices of goods and products vary from region to region, right? There's a lot of products that have different prices in different countries, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's take the iPhone, for example. The iPhone 10 cost $500 more in the EU than it does in USA. And the reverse is actually also true. Flowers in USA cost way more than flowers in Europe, especially Netherlands. And to be honest, even PC games, which are the epitome of intellectual property, there's literally no physical good there. Everything there is intellectual property, it's just code. And even that has different prices depending on which country you go to, right? So regular price for a AAA title in the USA costs about $60 US. Now, someone in Russia doesn't make that much money monthly, and they cannot afford $60 US to pay for that game. So what some game companies actually do is they'll actually charge Russian people less money as long as you buy through like a Russian server, in order to encourage you to play their game, because they know you cannot pay that, so they'll give you a lower price. So why should patents be exempt from that kind of dynamics? And to be honest, there are a couple of patent holders who are adapting to this already, and here is the method that I am proposing. So let's say Samsung has a patent and Apple wants to use it in their new iPhone. So Apple is going to pay Samsung $8 for that patent for their iPhone. So every iPhone they sell, they pay Samsung $8 no matter where they sell the iPhone. In India, in China, in USA, in Russia, in South America, doesn't matter, in Africa. Everything is $8 for an iPhone, doesn't matter where it's sold. However, this new model would allow Samsung to charge different prices for the exact same product, but sold in different regions. So for example, Apple would pay less money for that patent for an iPhone sold in India than they would for an iPhone sold in the USA for the exact same phone. So let's say, for example, India would cost like $3 for that patent, USA would cost $8, EU would cost $9, and Russia would cost $4. So then Samsung would actually charge Apple based on how many phones are sold in each country and multiply that by the corresponding value of the patent in that specific country. So that sounds pretty good, right? And no, I'm not a genius. I didn't come up with this. I actually found out that Xiaomi is actually doing this with a company already called Via International. And I really think this is the way to go. A patent fee based on what market you're selling your phone in for the exact same phone. Because different markets have different, annual salaries, and people can afford less in certain countries than others. And Xiaomi, for example, cannot afford to pay an $8 patent for a phone sold in India as they could and for a phone sold in the USA, because the people in America are willing to pay a lot more money for that cell phone. And of course, I want to give you the other side of the story. We all know patent law can be used for good, but it also can be used for evil. And I'm going to give you two examples for that. The first is patent trolls. To those of you who don't know what a patent troll is, a patent troll is a company that will buy a patent without the intention of actually using that patent, and then they'll go around to other companies and say, hey, I have this patent, I want you to pay me $8 per laptop. I want you to pay me $5 per cell phone. So they're pretty much using this patent law as kind of like an extortion scheme. So they're kind of like blackmailing the guy, say, hey, I want money, even though I'm not going to use the patent, whatever. And there's actually a really famous example of that. Do you guys know who Paul Allen is? He's a guy who co-founded Microsoft with Bill Gates. So he actually has a couple of patents from a company that he had way back, and he actually used these patents to sue the entire internet, including companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon and Netflix and eBay. All these huge companies, he sued them all because he has this portfolio of patents with a defunct company that he never intends to use. But of course, he didn't sue Microsoft because that is his own company. Number two, patent law can be used to destroy competitor. So let me give you an example. Let's say a 16-year-old kid in his basement invented a CPU that runs at 1,000 gigahertz. It costs $1. It's power efficient. It doesn't overheat. It's overall just a great CPU, and he's not willing to sell to, let's say, Intel and AMD. Now, Intel and AMD are very interested in protecting their own businesses to protect their own profit margins. And if this kid's not going to sell them this 1,000 gigahertz CPU, what other choice does Intel have to stop this from going to market and completely destroying Intel's and AMD's market share? Well, they can use patent infringement. They can sue this 16-year-old kid for patent infringement because they have deep pockets and just drag the lawsuit on until that poor kid has no more money and has to declare bankrupt, and then he's done. He cannot release that 1,000 gigahertz CPU into the market anymore. And that's actually why Apple and Samsung keep on suing each other, because that's pretty much what they're trying to do. So years back, China was developing. I mean, China's still developing now, but they're a lot more developed than they were many years ago. And as a developing country, it's critical that you have access to new technology to spur your economy forward. Now, the thing is, at that time, patents were priced for developed markets like USA and Europe and places like that, and not for developing countries like China or India who didn't have enough money to pay for those patents. And if they couldn't pay for those patents, that means they couldn't use those new technologies to help develop their country. Now, I'm not saying that gives them the right to steal these patents, but I just want to tell you the predicament that China is in. They need these new technologies to help spur their economy forward, but the price for these patents are so high that they cannot afford that new technology in the first place, which would be pretty much like a catch-22. They can't advance forward, and if they want to, they have to pay more money, but they can't pay enough more money because they haven't advanced forward far enough. So the last point I want to make, I think, will actually change your perspective on this whole issue. Did you know that back in the day, USA was basically China? Now, did you know that in the 1800s and 1900s, USA stole a lot of intellectual property from the United Kingdom? Basically, the Americans were running away from the United Kingdom to set up their own colonies in the Americas. And now that they're developing, UK actually had better technologies for many things than what you had in the USA. And a lot of businessmen in America actually went to England on tours to go there and try and grab intellectual property and then come back. So people would actually go to like a weaving machine or like a weaving factory, and then they would look at the designs and then come back and just copy it. And did you know that USA actually is more brazen than China right now? Did you know that back in the day, USA actually put out, or sorry, not USA, US businessmen, they would actually put out ads saying, yo, I need some British dudes to help me go to UK and steal some stuff and then come back. And of course, you have to be willing to be caught and arrested. If not, don't even apply. I mean, like, China doesn't even do that. So yeah, I just wanted to say that USA is not spotless. They did this kind of thing as well. So anyway, that's a quick overview of China stealing intellectual property from the USA and why it's so hard to stop them. Now, I don't know what the impact of Trump's sanctions are gonna be on China and what China's retaliatory sanctions are gonna have an effect on the world market, but we'll have to see as this thing develops. So what do you think about this video? Did you know that USA was a huge intellectual property thief back in the day? And what do you think of that adaptive patent pricing model that I proposed just now? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. And be sure to check out the video description down below for a giveaway to enter. It takes 5 seconds and it's free. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.